Hello and welcome to Cloud Insiders, the podcast that brings cloud down to earth, brought to you by Xtravirt. Today we are talking about some of the core priorities for managing risk and compliance in the hybrid cloud. It goes without saying that this is a massive topic, and today we just wanted to focus on how to get the basics right. What you can be doing to make sure that you're configured correctly and managing your environment to the best practices to reduce attack surfaces. Am I set up correctly? What am I managing, and what are the cloud hosts managing? How much control do I maintain? These are questions we should all be asking ourselves when connecting our private infrastructure to a public cloud and taking on a hybrid solution. But the journey doesn't stop there. Companies are constantly in the news owing to data loss or their infrastructure being compromised. And how can we ensure that we're not the next headline? Where do the holes appear? How do we patch them? And how do we stop them? Also, every day new rules and regulations are coming out of regulatory bodies such as the PRA or FCA. How can we assure that we are remaining compliant within our own industry? Do I need to document this? How can I prove what I'm doing? I'm breaking into a sweat just thinking about this, but there are answers to all these questions, and exceptionally positive ones at that. To help us get to the bottom of these, we're talking to Runecast, creators of predictive analytics software for VMware and AWS. We'll later be talking about how their tools integrate into VMware and AWS hybrid offerings in all forms, including VMware Cloud on AWS. From Runecast, we are talking to systems engineer Kev Johnson, and we're also talking to Gardner, strategic services director at Xtravirt. Hi, guys.
Hey there.
Hi, Stu.
Kev, if you could quickly give us a quick introduction to yourself and Runecast, what you do there and what it is you're all monitoring.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thanks for having me on the show. It's a great honor. I've been a big fan of the podcast for a long time, so I can tick this one off the bucket list. But yeah, I'm Kev Johnson. I'm a systems engineer at Runecast. So my job is basically to speak to customers and firstly, hopefully get them to use the product and really highlight the benefits that we can bring to you, but also make sure they're getting all of the benefits and feeding that back to our engineers and everything like that. What we're all about basically is we're looking at the kind of residual risks that you have in your environment, risks of things like purple screens of death, risks that, where you've got hardware incompatibilities and things like that. But also, one of the other things that we're really focusing on at the moment is regulatory compliance, so security compliance baselines. What we do is we deploy a little appliance into your environment. It doesn't send anything out to the cloud or anything like that, so it all runs on premises. From there, we're going to scan your environment for all of those risks I just mentioned, but also, we're going to run some checks against there and say, let's say, for example, you need to be PCI DSS compliant. So we've got all of the checks that we need written into the product so that you can validate if you're going to be PCI DSS compliant and not only get compliant, but also to stay compliant, because configuration drift is a real issue. That's kind of Runecast in a nutshell, but we're doing it for vSphere, we're doing it for a whole bunch of other things as well as VMware Cloud on AWS and also native AWS services.
Cool, that's absolutely great. And now, Robin, this isn't your first time on Cloud Insiders, but for anyone who doesn't know, could you give us a quick, in a nutshell, view of who you are and what you do at Xtravirt?
Yeah, hi there, Stu. I'm the Strategic Services Director for Xtravirt. My responsibilities include overseeing the strategic relationship with our core customers and also the oversight and growth of our managed services capabilities.
Guys, thanks so much for coming on. It's great to have you both here. My name is Stuart Robinson and I'll be your host for this discussion. And without much further ado, let's crack on. So Robin, if I could come to you first, from a strategic standpoint, why are risk and compliance under the spotlight when it comes to hybrid cloud? Are they and should they be considered roadblocks for companies on the road to cloud adoption?
It's a great question, Stuart. So from a business and IT perspective, we've got to make sure that we understand the technical and operational risks associated with those environments that we rely on. We need to make sure that we've got proactive and appropriate management of these risks in place to be compliant with our corporate standards and our regulatory requirements that we're managed by, most of the ones that Kev was mentioning earlier. Critically, though, we've also got to make sure that we can evidence that these controls are in place and effective. In the old days, it used to be the situation that having all of your platforms within the four walls of your own data center was the safest option. And having a team that you could closely monitor, being responsible for the operational activities for those services, was the only way that you could feel comfortable that you were controlling those risks. All of this was based on the belief that your own employees would have a greater vested interest in protecting your business, and as a result, they'd be better at managing your corporate assets. The situation isn't replicated in a cloud environment, and that means that your existing processes and controls can't be evidenced in the same way. And that ultimately can lead to a lack of trust of the cloud platforms and regulators and your internal compliance teams placing restrictions on how and where you use them. But that's starting to change. Regulators and organizational boards, etc., are now starting to warm to cloud as a way of supporting their business growth. And they're increasingly recognizing that cloud solutions often cover the basic risk scenarios, things like physical security, basic infrastructure configuration, to at least best practice levels in the industry. And that comes as standard. Too often, this is a higher standard than a lot of organizations unfortunately achieve internally. These attitudes are now accelerating. And with COVID-19 pandemic that we're just sort of coming out of lockdown from, we saw many organizations that had existing cloud capabilities were able to grow or add to these as part of their recovery strategy much faster than those organizations that just had legacy internal platforms reliant on the lead time associated with infrastructure delivery, servers being provisioned, etc. As we continue these moves to the cloud, key components of managing risks are getting the basics right. We've got to have robust operational management and routine maintenance activities in place. We've got to ensure that we're managing platforms in line with best practices, because this is a core foundational dependency for almost all other risk and compliance activities.
Okay, so I think we can agree, quite a big topic there. Can you give me a bit more detail on these best practices and that should be applied continuously in a cloud environment? Are these the responsibility of the business, or does the cloud provider take care of those?
Well, in a cloud environment, the patching and maintenance of the underlying infrastructure or the SaaS software is the responsibility of and carried out by the cloud provider. However, as these updates are released, as new features get added, or as new security risks are identified in the wild, it's the responsibility of the customer to ensure that their configuration is secure, that any patches that are their responsibility have been applied, that new software versions are adopted, and that best practices is still followed in line with the new requirements. I guess without these activities being carried out, it's similar to leaving your front door of your house open and hoping that the fact that you've installed video cameras will stop any property being pinched. Unfortunately, all those video cameras are going to do is tell you which direction your property left in.
So you mentioned previously about the COVID-19 pandemic. Kev, have you seen any change in demand since lockdown? Has there been an increase, or have they gone quiet as the focus has been on business reliance? Or if there's been an increased demand in hybrid cloud and similar solutions, do you see demand yet to come as people seek to audit what they've done and how they did it?
Yeah. I mean, so that's a great question, and largely what we've seen is two separate approaches. The first thing we saw as soon as we saw the announcement that there was going to be lockdown and that people were not going to be able to work from their offices was we had a fairly significant spike of demand from organizations that were having to do things like roll out remote working solutions, things like VMware Horizon. I imagine, you folks at Xtravirt will have seen a lot of call in that kind of direction. So both on premises and also cloud-based solutions, because you've got to deal with where are we going to find the servers just to have 1,000 people work from home who previously came into an office. The other approach that we've seen is that a lot of companies, I say unfortunately, it's obviously a valid way of managing risk, but what they did was they basically went into lockdown and they had a hard change freeze. So, in that situation, you've got a hard change freeze. We're 3 months down the line. You've not applied any patches for 3 months. Any changes that you had scheduled that should have happened in these 3 months haven't happened. And obviously, the baddies out there, they've been looking to capitalize on this. So I've seen a lot of phishing attempts and things like that. So, making sure that everything is in a good, solid state is difficult. And especially once, if you come out of 3 months of lockdown, all of a sudden you've got to kind of get back towards, and I hate this term, but something more of a new normal. We're seeing a lot of these customers that are now going, okay, right, we need to make sure our environment is sane, and we need to make sure that any changes that we need to make are getting done. but it's difficult if you've not got that view in the first place of what it looks like. So this is definitely somewhere we'd recommend that you engage with highly skilled, highly experienced technicians through organizations like Xtravirt, who can leverage the capabilities of Runecast Analyzer to give you a view of where your risks lie, how best to improve your posture.
Okay, so if we take a step back and look at how many people this is potentially affecting, because if it's affecting people's demand, and coming into 2020, I think around 61% of companies of all sizes had embraced some manner of hybrid cloud, and 87% of enterprises, embracing some manner of hybrid cloud strategy going forwards. But by many accounts, at the end of 2019, only about 21% of technicians thought that their organizations were taking their monitoring seriously. So, Kev, if we could come to you, where do you begin? How do you identify when and where things are diverging away from best practice? I mean, this is where monitoring the hybrid cloud comes into its own. Runecast integrates seamlessly across both existing VMware on-premise solutions and VMware Cloud on AWS, their hybrid cloud offering. Does VMware Cloud on AWS have anything built in natively to ensure companies are minimizing risk and running to best practices? How does Runecast amplify or simplify these features?
Yeah, so I mean, that's obviously something that Runecast we're really keen on our ability to help with. So what we do is we're constantly monitoring that environment. So if you deployed Runecast Analyzer 6 months ago, you've got every single point of information for that entire period. You're not in a position where you're relying on an annual audit. So, you have that period of, okay, we're going to spend 6 weeks, everyone's hair's on fire, they're throwing things out of the window, you've got to make sure you've shredded all those documents. But yeah, just getting yourself to a sane state is really difficult if you don't know what your environment looks like in the first place. So it's really important to measure, and that's kind of one of the things that we really try to do. Yeah, so I guess that's probably the best way to answer that question. But when you've got workloads running on premises and in places like VMware Cloud and AWS and in the native public cloud, you need to be able to see your compliance status across all of those platforms. So you can't just rely on one tool to do on-premises vSphere, one tool for VMware Cloud on AWS, because if you mix all of that stuff up, how do you draw the picture of, how do you get the big picture? So this is kind of where we come in. So we provide this assurance there for on-premises vSphere, NSXV with NSXT coming very soon, vSAN, Horizon, and all of the other stuff there. I guess also we're kind of giving you best practices across the board for, best practices from VMware, best practices from AWS. But we're giving you security compliance against a whole bunch of standards. So at present, we cover BSI, which is a German federal standard, which doesn't necessarily mean that it only applies in Germany. CIS, the Center for Internet Security, DISA STIG, so US military standards, HIPAA, NIST 853, and PCI DSS. So we do these regular scans. We retain the details of those scans on the appliance, and we provide you with that clear audit trail, so you can see as soon as you start to drift out of compliance. And when you do that, you see that uptick, so you're drifting away from that baseline, and from there you can kind of go, okay, right, we only have a small amount of work to do to get back to compliance, instead of we've spent a year drifting out of compliance and now we've got a whole bunch of stuff to fix.
I think I see a huge value for organisations in having that compliance report against the industry standards bodies. It just simplifies your regulatory compliance reporting and your internal reports to
Absolutely.
compliance and risk teams who aren't necessarily familiar with the bodies or trust you as an individual first.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the areas where Runecast really helps, because there's all kinds of monitoring tools out there, and they're really good at doing what they do. But one of the things that we, as far as I'm aware, are unique in the industry doing is we take these scans that we're doing and we're mapping the controls that the auditors created. So the auditors, these standards are written from a technology agnostic perspective. They're not specific to vSphere; they're specific to technology. So taking that information, the language that's in use is often very dry, and it might be very non-specific. And we then provide you with the information that says, okay, so in order to meet this specific control, this is what you need to do. This is how you audit it. This is how you remediate it if you've drifted away from compliance there.
I do love the fact that it gives that same report across multi-cloud. So I think you mentioned AWS and VMC on AWS, as well as the private data center installations of the platforms as well. I think that's a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
And what are the benefits of keeping this continuous focus on the status of your environment?
I kind of covered this a little bit earlier, but basically, in the traditional model, you would have an annual audit. So if you had to be HIPAA compliant, you'd have some auditors would come in, they'd ask a whole bunch of questions, they try to retrieve documents from your bins, they try and tailgate your staff into your offices. But from a technology perspective, doing that once a year it doesn't work. Change is now pretty much the only constant in the industry. So with this ability to see immediately, as soon as you start to drift away from your desired state, you're then in a much better place to remediate, rather than, okay, we'll have this slight drift away over the course of a year, and all of a sudden we've got 4,000 things that we need to do in order to get back to an audit ready state. You have the auditors come in, they go, okay, yeah, rubber stamp, yes, you passed, or even worse, I'm sorry, you have some other actions that you need to take to remediate this. We'll come back again and we'll bill you again. But yes, if we can keep those changes as small as possible so that you can remediate them as soon as possible, then it's going to make your life significantly easier.
I think the key thing on that, Kev, is you don't have to have, with an audit engagement or a compliance engagement, you don't necessarily have to have remediated everything.
Absolutely.
But if you can go in with a management identified understanding of all of your gaps and an action plan associated with them, it puts you in a much stronger position with your auditors to be able to defend your approach and the position that you're in at any point in time.
Yeah, forewarned is forearmed and all that.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing there is VMware give you all the tools to keep you sane, and Runecast, everyone's trying to keep you running and optimized. But now that we recognize the risks and we know what the additional benefits of monitoring your hybrid cloud are, is that the end of the story? How are Xtravirt and Runecast working together to protect you, your business, your users, your environment down the line? How can businesses push further and evolve faster by utilizing this partnership?
As Kev mentioned earlier, a lot of organisations have been making changes as a result of COVID-19 recovery actions, and we're seeing a lot of health checks and audit engagements to confirm the robust nature or security of those implementations, and we're expanding the use of Runecast in those solutions. But alongside that, we continue to see a lot of interest in growing VMware Cloud on AWS to expand on-premise VMware solutions, and huge potential for rapid deployments of Horizon Digital Workspace and Workspace ONE. We've recently been recognized by VMware for these implementations. And personally, from a managed services perspective, I see huge value in the insight that we'll get using Runecast, or we're starting to get using Runecast in those solutions that guide our platform maintenance priorities for those managed services customers. And we're also using it to enhance our risk and compliance reporting that we proactively provide to them as part of our service management engagement.
Yeah, that's actually a great point as well. So Runecast can provide you with a great deal of insight into the risks in your environment, as well as the details of what you need to do to resolve them. So it works as from an end user perspective, but we're also seeing a lot of value and a lot of demand from service provider side of things too. So we recently introduced a feature called Enterprise Console, and this allows people like yourselves at Xtravirt to provide this kind of multi-tenant monitoring capability to their managed services customers. So you can see everything, and you can see very quickly as soon as your customers start to inherit extra risk in their environment, and you can take the actions from there. So yeah, there's a lot of value in that as well.
That's great, Kevin. That's been really helpful for us. And the other area that we're exploring is the value of this compliance and proactive risk management reporting to highly regulated organisations, which include those in financial services, healthcare, and government as well, where robust controls and the ability to evidence ongoing compliance, not, as you said earlier, not just annually, but on an ongoing basis, are absolutely fundamental to, well, if we use Gardner terms, the digital infrastructure operating model. Within those environments, the security of the platform itself is just important as the insight itself it provides, though, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we could say you deploy the appliance and that's it, you're done. But that's obviously not the case. The appliance is only as useful as the insights it can give. And if we're looking at customers, we're looking at the problems that they have, and we're identifying security issues, but our appliance was not getting the security fixes that it needed, then yeah, it would be significantly less useful than it is. So on that note, we have, we're pushing out these updates every week. But if you can't get those updates, what do you do? So, if you can't allow your appliance to connect out to the internet, you've got problems potentially. But thankfully, we've got a couple of options for those higher security air gap type environments, and also larger environments where there might be a desire to use something like a central repository that you can expose that to the internet that will pull your updates down in a similar sort of way to VMware Update Manager download service or Microsoft WSOS does. So you don't have to then expose the Runecast appliance to the internet. You just pull all of the knowledge definitions from that central repository. For those customers who even that is too much exposure to the internet, we also provide a fully offline capability. So you can go to our portal from your management workstation or wherever. You can log in there and you can just download the appliance updates. Now, bear in mind, these are coming out once a week, sometimes more than once a week, where there's things like, so for example, we had a VMware Security Advisory published yesterday, I think it was. So we have a knowledge definition going out today with that detail in there. So you can download that. You can sheep dip the download that you've downloaded. It's just a binary file. It's very, very small, so you can antivirus scan, you can pull it to pieces in a hex editor if that's what you really want to. And then once you're happy with the security of that, you take that payload and you can apply it out of band to the appliance. Now, obviously, I can't talk too much about specific customers, because especially those kind of customers, it's going to get me into a lot of trouble. But I can confirm that we have some customers in some very, very interesting situations in terms of updates. And Runecast is the only option for them to do these in these situations.
That's fantastic, and I personally, Kev, I don't think I realised that you were turning around those security update validations as quickly as that. I mean, it's almost an antivirus pace.
Yeah.
So you've got your antivirus, you invest in that, but to have that same capability for configuration guidelines, best practice changes, and more importantly, information security or critical information security knowledge base articles, that's just amazing.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize how often knowledge base articles were updated until I saw what we see from our AI that's kind of monitoring all these sources. It's a lot more rapid than I previously thought. And I used to work at VMware, so I had some insight into how that kind of worked. It's amazing.
And I guess it's no use VMware keeping on top of their configurations and providing the updates rapidly if the customers don't realize that they're there, and more importantly, don't then act upon them either.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the thing. Nobody ever looks at the knowledge base until they've got something that's broken. And this was the one problem that Runecast Analyzer was originally built to solve. We're going to scan, we're going to make sure that all of those risks in your environment are being scanned against the knowledge base so that we can tell you about them, make you aware of them so you can remediate those issues before you have these purple screens of death, before you have these security vulnerabilities. So, we get a lot of really, really good feedback. The fact that we're now pushing out these updates every week is, we get a lot of good feedback on that as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds absolutely brilliant. Having something that's learning day to day on the industry that you work on is just, it's insanity, really, isn't it? So earlier on, I asked, is adopting the hybrid cloud the end of the journey? And I guess the short answer is no. Reaching the hybrid cloud is like reaching the next level. By adopting a solution such as running workloads on premises and in the VMware Cloud software-defined data center, or by moving to VMware Cloud on AWS, you've powered up and have a much stronger tool set than before, but the story keeps going, and you have to keep nurturing your investment to ensure that you're getting the most out of it and reaching your goals. Monitoring your investment and getting solid insights lets you know the best places and ways to feed and water it, which helps you reach strategic targets significantly faster. The Runecast Analyzer tool gives you the ability to see all of these wins and stay as risk-free as you see fit and compliant to keep you playing by the rules. Of course, once you've identified what you need to do and improve, or if you found some chinks in your armor, Xtravirt are on hand as a trusted guide to help you to the next level. Adopting the hybrid cloud can be a big step for your business, and there are potential pitfalls, but by using the right tools and with the right help, you can avoid them without even breaking a sweat. Guys, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Kev, if anyone wanted to speak to you or learn more about Runecast, how would they go about doing that?
So I mean, if folks want to learn any more about Runecast, it's really simple, www.runecast.com. You can sign up for a free trial there. There's a whole contact us page, there's some case studies, there's a free online demo if you just want to go to the demo and see what the interface looks like at demo.runecast.com. But if you want to get hold of me, you can get me on the Twitters at Kev_Johnson, or you can email me if you really want to, but believe me, Twitter is the best way to get hold of me, but my email is kevj@runecast.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Robin, how about you? Have you got any closing statements for us?
Yes. So I think this is one area that loads of organizations think that they are doing operational management well. And I suspect a good number of them would be quite surprised at the results of a Runecast scan or an Xtravirt health check.
Absolutely.
If you're interested in Xtravirt managed services, then you can go to xtravirt.com/XMS. Best way to get to me is LinkedIn. So Robin Gardner Xtravirt. Then I'll come up and I'm really quick to respond there.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. If you'd like to find out more about Cloud Insiders, you can find us on Twitter at Cloud Insiders, and you can get hold of us on team@cloudinsiders.fm. You can get all of our episodes on cloudinsiders.fm, or you can go to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, anywhere that you get your podcast, really. And we've got all the episodes up on YouTube. And yeah, guys, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and it's been hugely insightful.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And look forward to speaking to you soon.